Hello everyone, Archana is here. Welcome to the 6th session of presentation, ICSE Class 10, Paper 2, Literature in English. In today's session, let us deal with the poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is written by poetess Maya Angelou. She is a powerful feminist writer of Afro-American ethnicity. She is a widely acclaimed author, poet, and civil rights activist. She had a very difficult childhood, and this poem that was written in 1969 tells about the agonies of discrimination based by her. She was doubly marginalized on the basis of race and gender. She started writing poetry in order to recover from the trauma of an assault. Poetry thus played an important role in her recovery and signaled the success of the healing process. Maya Angelou is widely regarded as the Black woman's poet laureate. Her reflections on the society and the times she lived in are vividly expressed in her poetry. Outwardly, the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings or Caged Bird, as it is often interchangeably known, can be seen as a reflection on social disparity and the ideals of freedom and justice. Angelou, with the metaphor of birds, represents the inequality of justice seen in the society of her time, which differentiates between the African American community and its white American counterpart. Through her poem, she also illustrates the nature of both freedom and captivity by creating a stark contrast between the two, using birds as a metaphor. In this poem, Maya has projected two contrasting images, namely of a free bird and a trapped bird. It is metaphorically alludes to the differences between whites and the African Americans during the civil rights era. Form and structure of the poem. The poem is divided into 6 stanzas describing the state of two birds, where one is free and floats and dares to claim the sky, while the other is caged in his bar of rage. The first and the third stanza shows the delight of the free bird experiencing freedom, whereas the rest of the stanzas concentrate on the plight of the caged bird. Angelou puts greater emphasis on the lamentable state of the caged bird and contrasts this with that of the free bird. Although the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings has no definitive rhyme scheme, it creates the illusion of rhyme with the clever use of consonants. The enchantment in the poem draws the reader's eye to things of importance in a blunt manner. Now, let's deal with the poem.
A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that's stomped down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens up his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But the caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens up his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
First stanza. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. In these lines, the poet refers to the nature. She describes the way a free bird leaps on the back of the wind. She describes the bird's flight against the orange sky. The free bird has the right to claim the sky. The way she describes the orange sun rays gives the reader an appreciation for the natural beauty of the sky. And her description of the way the bird dips his wing helps the reader to appreciate the bird in his natural habitat, enjoying his freedom. The opening lines show a bird leaping on the back of the wind, demonstrating the freedom it experiences to move about and glide freely through the air. It hovers over a stream of wind and floats downwards to where the current of the stream ends and the wind is calm. It dips its wing in the sea of orange sunlight. The bird is shown in a state of great tranquility. It has the freedom to move about wherever it desires. It is so utterly free and without restraints that it dares to claim the sky. The whole firmament is his own one big home. The poem begins with a spirit of freedom and joy. The opening lines describe the liberty of a free bird that can move anywhere it wants with no restrictions. The bird has the freedom to move as freely as the wind moves. It flies in the direction of the current. It seems like the bird has immersed its wings in the orange sun rays. The sky has become its habitat, and it is bold enough to claim the sky as its own. It flies like it owns the whole sky. Second stanza. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. This stanza is in stark contrast with the first by using the word but. To begin this stanza, the speaker prepares the reader to this contrast. Then she describes the bird that stalks his narrow cage. The tone is immediately and drastically changed from peaceful, satisfied, and joyful to one that is dark, unnerving, and even frustrating. She describes that this caged first can seldom see through his bars of rage. The caged bird can seldom see through his bars of rage, while the free bird gets to enjoy the full sky. The caged bird rarely even gets a glimpse of the sky. She claims that his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Text from her autobiography reveals that Angelou often felt this way in her life. She felt restricted from enjoying the freedom that should have been her right as a human being. The speaker then reveals that these are the very reasons that the bird opens his throat to sing. The author felt this way in her own life. She wrote and sang and danced because it was her way of expressing her longing for freedom. Here, poet Maya Angelou contrasts the situation by presenting the image of a caged bird. The caged bird tries to go after his cage in vain. The cage is narrow and its metaphorical bars are of rage. The caged bird is seen to be angry with its situation. It desires with all its heart to escape its plight. But the caged bird cannot see beyond his cage. Its wings are clipped, that is, its freedom is taken away. Wings are associated with flight, which in turn is associated with freedom. The words his wings are clipped mean that its freedom is forcibly taken away. It cannot fly even if it desires to. Its feet are tied. A bird tied to the ground represents an image completely opposite to its true nature of flight. This represents the fact of alienation of the bird. But the most important thing is that despite being in this utterly despondent predicament, the caged bird opens his throat to sing. That seems to be his only joy and achievement in life. The stanza immediately contrasts the freedom of the free bird to the restricted life of the caged bird. The poet uses the word stark to describe how the caged bird looks through its cage, to intensify the sense of fear that arises from leading a restricted life. He can almost never clearly see through the bars. The bird is a limited space. The bird lives its life in a limited space. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Wings symbolize the freedom of flight and the freedom of movement. The caged bird is denied its natural right. The bird is angry and frustrated at this situation, and he desires to escape, but he is helpless. His freedom is forcibly taken away, and he has no other choice than to open his throat and sing. This seems to be the only source of joy and refreshment in his life. Third stanza. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill. For the caged bird sings of freedom. Here, the poet focuses on the caged bird yet again. The author implies that even though the caged bird may have never experienced true freedom, deep down that bird still knows that it was created to be free. Although freedom to the caged bird is fearful because it is unknown, he still sings a fearful trill because he still longs for freedom. Here the speaker reveals that his cry for freedom is heard on the distant hill. The last line states, "For the caged bird sings of freedom." With this, the speaker implies that although the caged bird may never have experienced freedom, he still sings of it because he was created for freedom. This is paralleled to the African American struggle in Maya Angelou's time. She feels that Black Americans wrote and sang and danced and cried out for the freedom they deserved, but they were only heard as a distant voice. Yet, this would not stop them from crying out for freedom and equality, because they knew they were made for freedom, and they would not relent until they were given their rights as human beings to enjoy the freedom they were created to enjoy. The caged bird has a wavering voice. He is singing of freedom, something he does not have. The idea of freedom is his dream, one he cannot achieve. So he sings about it. There is fear in his voice. He had never known what freedom tastes like, but hopes to have it for his own. His voice can be heard from distant places, on hills where it inspires others to dream of freedom. The caged bird doesn't sing of sadness, but of hope, inspiration, and of freedom. Even through the bars, the caged bird tries to sing. His voice quivers as he full of fear. He longs for freedom, which is something he never had. He does not know what freedom feels like, but still there is a part of him that eagerly wants to break free from the shackled existence. The longing in his voice is so intense that it is heard at faraway places. The pathetic situation of the enslaved bird is depicted in his yearning desire for freedom. Fourth stanza. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. In this stanza, the poetess reverts back to the free bird, further cementing the difference between the free bird and the caged bird in the minds of the readers. She writes that a free bird thinks of another breeze, that he can enjoy the sighing trees and be free to find his own food. The tone with which she writes the first and fourth stanzas sharply contrast with the second stanza. The first and fourth stanzas give the reader a sense of ecstasy and thrill, which serve to make the second stanza seem all the more oppressive. The free bird, on the other hand, revels in his freedom. He enjoys flying through the trade wind that blows through the trees. Sighing trees probably refers to the sighing sound made by the breeze while passing through the leafy branches. It gives an indication that their lack of freedom, as the trees are also tied to the ground like the caged bird. The free bird thinks of the fat worm that will be his food, with the wind in his feathers, water, and earth beneath him. The whole sky with him, he feels majestic in his freedom and calls the entire sky his own domain. By names the sky his own. The poet's wishes to express that the bird knows himself to be the proprietor of this whole universe. Here, the sky stands for the universe. The free bird has the freedom to enjoy and fly through the soft wind that passes through the branches of the sighing trees. This image is the epitome of liberty and freedom. The free bird then thinks of the fat worms that seem to be waiting to be consumed by him. The bird seems to name the whole sky its own as it experiences the utmost freedom to rule the sky and go anywhere it wants. This stanza brings up the idea that when you are at peace, the entire world is yours. Fifth stanza. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadows shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The fifth stanza continues the parallel between the free bird and the caged bird. The first line serves to starkly contrast the last line in the fourth stanza. It is dark and daunting. The reality of the life of the caged bird is revealed in this line. That bird stands on the grave of dreams. This reveals the author's feelings about her own dreams. She has so many dreams that have died because she was never given the freedom to achieve all that her white counterparts were able to achieve. Discrimination and racism made up her cage, and although she sang, she felt her voice was not heard in the wide world, but only by those nearest her cage. The second line of this stanza is not only dark but even frightening. The speaker describes the bird's cries as shouts on a nightmare scream. At this point, the caged bird is so despondent in his life of captivity that his screams are like that of someone having a nightmare. The author then repeats these lines. The caged inversely knows that he is not flying in the sky, that is, not free, that he is not free, but a captive, a prisoner. He thus stands on the grave of dreams. He knows his dreams of flying in a free firmament. To experience freedom is futile. So he knows, the bird knows that his dreams of flying in a free firmament to experience freedom is futile. He had lost all hope of freedom. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. It is more pitiable, more adverse than a nightmare. His wings are clipped and feet are tied. There is only a little hope of freedom, and so the bird opens his throat to sing. The bird wishes to travail against all adversities. Travail against all adversities. There is a faint but kindling voice of hope in his song. To sum up this stanza, the cage has now become a grave of the bird's dream. It is imprisoned, and bird's dream is imprisoned and forced to exist in a dark and confined space where there is no scope to dream. His condition is worse than a nightmare. The bird's cries for freedom resemble the screams of someone having a nightmare. There is a strong sense of pity, helplessness, and sadness in the bird's song. We observe a repetition of the lines: his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. This repetition serves to intensify the sense of tragedy in the bird's captive life. Sixth stanza. The caged bird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill. For the caged bird sings of freedom. This refrain, recurring as a stanza, justifies the bird's stout determination to keep going after his dream of freedom. Moreover, the caged bird chooses to sing as this is the only freedom available to him that he can enjoy without any restriction. His wings are clipped, feet are tied, but his throat is not choked yet. This is something the poet have felt at heart, and that is why she uses the title I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This might be seen as a poet's message to raise a voice, to express ourselves, even though the stronger wants to suppress the weaker and to never ever give up, no matter what situation we are in. In many ways, the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings can be considered as a poet's personal expression. Maya Angelou can be regarded as the caged bird in the poem. A stanza in the poem is repeated to catch the attention to the idea of the caged bird singing for freedom. The poem uses a metaphor to compare caged birds to African Americans fighting for equality during the civil rights movement. The poem closes with the refrain in which the bird dreams of his freedom from its monotonous existence. The final stanza is a repetition of the third stanza, which serves to stress on the sorrowful condition of the caged bird. However, this repetition also emphasizes on the bird's dedication to keep hoping. He chooses to sing for freedom as this is the only kind of freedom that is available to him. He does not lose hope and continues to dream of the day when he will be a free bird. Now, let's conclude the poem. Maya Angelou's poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, describes the state of two birds, where one is free and floats and dares to claim the sky, while the other is caged in his bars of rage. The first and the fourth stanza shows the delight of the free bird experiencing freedom, whereas the rest of the stanzas concentrate on the plight of the caged bird. Angelou puts greater emphasis on the lamentable state of the caged bird and contrasts this with that of the free bird. As the poet depicts in the poem, the free bird floats on the back of the wind, dips his wings in the orange sun rays, and claims the sky as his own. He thinks of another breeze through the trees and dreams of good eatables like fat worms waiting on bright lawn. He lives in a colorful, bright, and dreamy world. On the other hand, the caged bird. The caged bird walks sadly inside his narrow cage and tries hard to see through the bars of his cage. His wings are clipped and feet are tied. He lets out his nightmare scream to express his agony, anger, and fear. Sometimes the caged bird opens his throat to sing. He sings of freedom and hope. Here, the theme of freedom and confinement is the most predominant theme in the poem. The image of the free bird living a life of unparalleled joy and liberty stands for freedom, while enslavement in the poem is symbolized by the restricted life of the caged bird, whose wings are clipped and feet are tied. The poem begins with the description of the undisturbed movement of the bird that is free to fly anywhere it wants. The sky is its natural habitat, and it is free to dip its wings in the orange rays of the sun covering the sky. The free bird lives in its own life with no boundaries and control. However, the caged bird lives an imprisoned life in a narrow cage. The caged bird can hardly get a glimpse of the sky. It cannot move freely as its wings have been clipped. It lives in a helpless and a miserable state and only longs for freedom in its sad songs. The free bird is able to enjoy the cool breeze that passes through the leafy branches of trees. But the cage for the caged bird has become a grave of dreams where there is no freedom and no happiness. The caged bird is full of rage, but there is nothing that it can do about it except to sing songs in the hope of better tomorrow. The conditions of the free bird and caged bird totally represents the whites and the African Americans during the civil rights era. The restricted life of the caged bird stand for the inequality, injustice and discrimination that the African Americans had to face during that period. Voice against injustice. The caged bird is subjected to constant mental, physical, and emotional torture. Its freedom is forcibly taken away. But even after such cruel treatment, we observe the bird hope for freedom. It refuses to give up and longs for a day when it would experience its freedom of life. It sings for freedom even in such a miserable state. It is a reference to the condition of the African Americans who wrote songs, sang, and danced in hope for freedom and equality. The caged bird did raise its voice against discrimination, even though it was heard as a distant voice. This poem indirectly draws our attention to the racial discrimination that existed in America during the time of apartheid that separated the whites and the African Americans in the society. The caged bird symbolizes the African Americans and the inhuman way in which they were treated just because the different color of their skin. The poet expresses the restricted and enslaved life of the American, that is African Americans, through the representation of the clipped wings and tied feet of the caged bird. The caged bird thus represents the entire African American community that was subjected to social and religious discrimination and were denied the right of freedom. The caged bird reflects the status of women in the society. Do you agree? On many levels, this poem can be seen as an autobiography of Maya's life. The caged bird is a symbol for Maya herself, who had to face a lot of discrimination, harassment, and assault since a very early age. She belonged to the African American community, and on the top of that, she was a woman. A literary piece is always open to different interpretations, you all know that. Though Angelou's poem originally indicated the distress of African Americans in comparison to their white counterparts, the imagery of birds may symbolize any oppressed section of the society. In a patriarchal society, women enjoy lesser freedom than men. In many societies, at least in Angelou's time, women had no right to education and outdoor jobs. They lived within the house like the caged bird in the poem, having no freedom and no opportunity to realize their dreams. So, it won't be wrong to interpret the caged bird as a reflection of the status of women in the society. The usual association that the story of the caged bird brings to the mind is that of the status of the women in our patriarchal society, where women are not allowed to do certain things and are always told that they should remain within the household. From childhood, a girl is often made to learn that she should keep herself a check, should be obedient, to learn to do household works, to see the world only from within the house and never dare to tread outside the house, etc. etc. Aren't there situations similar to that of caged bird? The poet, through the through the analogy of the caged bird is making us realize the pain of being not able to do what one wishes to do. It is not that women are the only ones who have the plight of being caged. Any marginal community shares the same plight as that of women. Maya Angelou, through her depiction of the sad state of the caged bird, is evoking the lives of people like them. Whether that of women in patriarchal society, whether that of blacks during the days of slavery, or that of untouchables in a caste ridden society, or that of colonized in a colonial setup. Now, let's see the poetic devices used in the poem A Caged Bird. The poet has used a number of poetic devices in this poem. That is, I know why the caged bird sings. The first one, metaphor. The poet uses metaphor and indirect comparison. You all know in the first class I have dealt with metaphor in the class while dealing with daffodils. Okay, the poet uses metaphor. It is an indirect comparison when she compares wind to water. The words downstream and current make us think of the tides in a sea or ocean and floats downstream till the current ends. Again, she uses metaphors in the use of two birds. That is, one is free bird and the other one caged bird. The free bird represents the privileged section of the society, whereas the caged one signifies the underprivileged. Maya Angelou was an active participant in the African American freedom movement. That is why this poem is seen as an autobiographical representation of the condition she and her community was in. The slavery and segregation of the African Americans are compared to the condition of the caged bird, and the free bird refers to the freedom enjoyed by the white Americans. Alliteration. Alliteration means repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of nearby words. Alliteration is used in places like can seldom see through. Here repetition of s sound. Can seldom see through, see. And the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. Here repetition of wa sound. His shadow shouts on a nightmare screams. Here repetition of sh sound. Shadows, shouts. End rhyme and internal rhyme. End rhyme is used in the second, fourth, and sixth lines of the third stanza. Trill, still, and hill. Internal rhyme is used in the fourth stanza. And the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. Imagery. Angelou has used vivid imageries. Orange sun rays, distant hills, fat worms, etc. are examples of visual imageries, while sighing trees, nightmare scream, and fearful trill are auditory imageries. Personification. The poet has personified. Its personification means applied human characteristics for the lifeless things. The two birds, when she says, dips his wing, dares to claim the sky, name the sky his own, opens his throat to sing, sings of freedom, etc. Repetition. The poet has repeated the third stanza later in the poem to emphasize the distressed condition of the downtrodden people. Moreover, the use of contrast in the form of two birds in completely opposite situation and the use of moods in fearful trill, nightmare scream, bright lawn, and grave of dreams, etc. also form literary devices. Here you can just go through the imageries for your reference. Home assignment. Read the extract given below and answer the questions that follow. You have 5 questions here based on the extract given. First question, how does the poet describe the world of nature? Second question, what is the symbolic significance of the sun, sky and wind here? Third question, describe the image of the bird as presented in this stanza. Fourth question, what is the free bird metaphor for? And the fifth question, how does the caged bird behave and why? Answer to all these questions and submit your paper in the Google Classroom. Thank you all.